The main docking ring of the Human Alliance's capital station was always busy. Traders, officers, and travelers moved through the wide corridors, their footsteps mixing with the constant hum of the station's engines. But today, there was something different in the air, something heavier, like the quiet before an important announcement. A large silver ship had arrived. Its surface shone under the station lights, smooth and flawless. The ship belonged to the Tavern Empire, one of the oldest alien civilizations in known space. They were tall, slender beings with skin that seemed to reflect soft light, almost like water. Tavern rarely left their home world, so when one came to a human station, it was a big event. Everyone was whispering about the same thing, the arrival of Princess Neva. Princess Neva was not like the other royal visitors people had heard about in stories. She was blind from birth. She could not walk on her own, moving instead in a small hover chair that glided silently over the floor. In Tavern culture, this was seen as a great disadvantage. Their leaders were usually chosen from the strongest and most able-bodied. Neva's disabilities made many doubt she could rule one day. But this visit was not about ruling. It was about finding a bond partner. A bond partner was not just a friend. It was a deep connection of mind and senses, a sharing of thoughts, feelings, and even perceptions. For Tavern, a bond was sacred, formed only once in a lifetime. Some bonds were for love, others for duty, and some for the survival of their people. Neva's bond would be both personal and political. It would tie her life to someone else's forever. But there was a problem. Many species had already refused her. The bond required trust and closeness, and some believed bonding with a disabled partner would be more burden than blessing. Even among her own people there were whispers, some saying she should give up the search entirely. The station's great hall had been prepared for her welcome. Flags of both the Human Alliance and Tavern Empire hung from the high ceiling. The human commander gave a formal speech, and the Tavern ambassador introduced the princess. The crowd watched as Neva's hover chair glided forward. Her long silver hair flowed like liquid metal, and her pale eyes, though blind, looked calm and steady. Neva spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I have traveled far, not to be pitied, but to find someone who will walk beside me. Not with steps, but with thoughts. If there is one among you who believes in what we can build together, I will listen." Polite applause followed. But as the meeting ended and the crowd began to move away, most people avoided looking directly at her. Some whispered to each other, others quickly left for their duties. She was left alone near the edge of the hall, the quiet hum of her hover chair, the only sound. That was when Daniel noticed her. Daniel was not an officer or a diplomat. He worked in the engineering section, fixing air filters, cargo lifts, and power conduits. His uniform was plain, his hands often marked with small burns from welding. He had not come to the hall expecting to meet anyone important. He had just finished his shift and wanted to see the Tavern ship out of curiosity. Now he saw the princess sitting alone. For a moment he thought someone else would approach her, maybe a captain or scientist. But no one did. Everyone kept a polite distance, as if they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. He walked over. "You're Princess Neva, right?" he asked. His voice was casual, almost unsure. Neva turned her head slightly toward him. "Yes," she said, her tone even. "And you are?" Daniel. I fix things around here. Machines, mostly. He scratched the back of his neck. Not exactly royal company, I guess. Her lips curved into a small smile. Machines are important. Without them, even a royal ship would be helpless. Daniel chuckled. True. So, how's your trip been? She seemed surprised at the question. Most people, when they spoke to her, asked about her condition or her duties. No one asked if she enjoyed her journey. She told him about the quiet hum of the star drive, the patterns she felt through the ship's vibration when passing asteroid fields, and the way she imagined stars based on temperature readings. Daniel listened carefully. He didn't pretend to understand all of it, but he could hear the care in her voice. Sounds like you notice things most people miss, he said. I have to, she replied. When you cannot see, you learn to see differently. They talked for several more minutes. Daniel didn't treat her like a fragile artifact. He joked about station food being terrible, and she laughed softly. She asked about his work, and he explained how repairing old systems was like solving puzzles. She asked if he liked puzzles, and he said yes, especially the ones everyone else gives up on. Before they parted, Daniel said lightly, Well, if you still need someone for that bond thing, I guess I could sign up. He meant it as a joke, but Neva tilted her head. You would? She asked. Daniel froze for a second. Well, sure. Why not? Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was thoughtful. Most people would not even speak to me unless they had to. You have already done more. Daniel shrugged again, trying to hide the awkward warmth in his chest. Guess I'm not most people. The station lights dimmed slightly, signaling the change of shift. Neva's hover chair hummed softly as she moved toward her attendants. But before she left, she said, I will remember your voice, Daniel. As she disappeared into the crowd, Daniel stood there wondering why talking to her felt different. It wasn't pity. It wasn't duty. It felt like the start of something he couldn't name yet. And somewhere deep in the Tavern ship, Princess Neva thought about the strange human who spoke to her like she was just a person. Not a symbol, not a burden, not a royal prize. For the first time in a long while, she felt curious about what might happen next. The next day, the station was quieter. The Tavern ship remained docked, but most people had gone back to their usual routines. The grand welcome was over, and for many, the alien princess was already becoming just another piece of news to talk about over lunch. But Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He had work to do. 3 broken air filters in the agricultural ring and a faulty cargo lift in Dock 6. Still, every time he tightened a bolt or checked a wiring panel, the memory of her calm voice returned to him. She had said she would remember his voice. That thought sat in the back of his mind like a strange, warm weight. By evening, Daniel found himself walking toward the visitors' wing where the Tavern delegation was staying. He told himself it was just curiosity. He had never been inside that part of the station before, but deep down, he knew why he was going. 2 Tavern guards stood at the entrance. They were taller than Daniel by at least a head, with smooth silver armor that caught the light. Their eyes were unreadable. One of them stepped forward. State your business. Daniel cleared his throat. I'm here to see Princess Neva. The guard's gaze sharpened. Do you have an appointment? Not really, Daniel admitted. She, told me yesterday she'd remember my voice. The guards exchanged a glance. For a moment, Daniel thought they would laugh or send him away. But then one spoke into a small communication device on his wrist. A few seconds later, he nodded. "You may enter. Follow me." Daniel walked behind the guard through smooth, silver-lined corridors that seemed quieter than any part of the station he'd ever been in. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers, but not any kind he recognized. They stopped at a wide doorway. Inside, the room was softly lit. Curtains of thin, shimmering fabric hung from the ceiling, and the walls glowed faintly with patterns that shifted like moving water. Princess Neva sat in the center, her hover chair silent, her hands resting lightly on the armrests, her head turned toward him the moment he stepped in. "Daniel," she said, her tone steady. "You came." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, I, figured you might want some company." "You are not afraid of breaking rules?" she asked. "I fix things for a living," Daniel said with a grin. "If I break a rule, I can always fix it later." Her lips curved into that small smile again. "Sit." He pulled up a chair. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel said, "So, did you get any volunteers yet?" "No," she said simply. He frowned. "Not even one?" "Not even one," she repeated. "Most see my disabilities before they see me. They imagine the bond as a burden they would have to carry. They think they will lose more than they gain." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Sounds like they don't know what they're missing." Her head tilted slightly. "And what do you think they are missing?" Daniel shrugged. "I think you probably have skills they can't even imagine. I mean, you described asteroid fields yesterday like you were reading a story from a book. That's something." Neva's voice softened. "When one sense is taken away, others grow stronger. I can sense tiny changes in air pressure, or the way sound moves around a space. I can feel vibrations through the floor that tell me who is walking, or even if they are nervous." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "That's actually pretty amazing." She tilted her head again. "And what about you, Daniel? What do you think you offer a bond?" He laughed. "Honestly, I don't know. I can fix a broken water pump in half an hour. I can weld a cracked hull panel without burning my eyebrows off. Not exactly royal talents. But you speak to me," she said quietly, "not to the image of me others carry in their minds." Daniel didn't answer right away. There was something in her voice that made him feel both proud and sad at the same time. Proud because she trusted him enough to say it. Sad because it meant she had spent most of her life being treated like an object instead of a person. "Maybe that's because I don't know what a royal image is supposed to be," Daniel said finally. "I just talk to people." Neva turned, her head slightly, as if studying his tone. "And if I asked you again about the bond?" Daniel blinked. "Wait, you're serious?" "I am," she said simply. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You know, I was kind of joking yesterday." "I know," she replied, "but I was not." The room seemed to go quieter, the soft hum of her hover chair the only sound. Daniel thought about what it meant. A bond wasn't just friendship. It was sharing your mind with someone. Forever. If it failed, both people could be scarred in ways no doctor could fix. "You don't even know me," he said finally. "I know enough," she said. "You did not walk away." Daniel looked at her, and for a moment, he saw past the silver hair, the pale eyes, and the hover chair. He saw someone who had been turned away so many times that even the smallest kindness meant more than most people could guess. "Well," he said slowly, "if you still need someone, maybe I could think about it." Neva's expression didn't change much, but there was a faint light in her pale eyes. "That is all I ask." They talked for another hour. She asked about the places he'd been, the things he'd fixed, and the strangest problems he had ever solved. He asked about the Tavern homeworld, the way their oceans glowed at night, and the music that carried through their floating cities. By the time Daniel stood to leave, the station's artificial night cycle had begun. The lights in the corridors outside were dim, and the hum of the engines seemed louder in the quiet. As he left, Neva said, "I will remember this conversation." Daniel smiled. "Guess I will too." When he walked back to his quarters, he realized something had shifted inside him. He wasn't sure yet if he wanted the bond, but he was sure of one thing. He wanted to see her again. And in her private chambers, Princess Neva sat in the soft glow of her room, feeling a small thread of hope. For the first time in a long while, Princess Neva requests your presence. Daniel stared at the words for a few seconds. He thought it might be a mistake. After all, people like him didn't usually get personal invitations from alien royalty. But when the message repeated, itself followed by a location and time, he knew it was real. He wiped the grease from his hands, changed into a clean uniform, and made his way to the Tavern delegation's private wing. The same tall guards were waiting at the entrance. This time, they didn't question him, just stepped aside and let him through. The corridor inside was quiet. At the far end, the doors to a larger chamber slid open. Daniel stepped in and froze. The room looked almost like a small temple, soft. White light came from the ceiling, and the walls were lined with flowing silver patterns. In the center stood Princess Neva in her hover chair, facing him. Beside her was the Tavern ambassador, holding a small crystalline device that pulsed with a gentle blue glow. "Daniel," Neva said, her voice calm, "I have made my choice." He raised an eyebrow. "Choice about what?" "The bond," she replied. "I want it to be with you." Daniel's mouth went dry. Wait, you're serious? I mean, me? Out of everyone?" "You did not walk away," she said simply. "You spoke to me without fear, without pity, and without pretending. That is enough." The ambassador stepped forward. "The bond is a sacred act. It is for life. If either of you resists during the connection, the minds may reject each other. That rejection can cause permanent harm." Daniel swallowed. "No pressure, huh?" Neva gave a faint smile. "You can still say no." He looked at her. Really looked at her. She was different from anyone he had ever met. There was strength in her calmness, and something in the way she spoke made him feel steady, like he belonged here. "Well," he said finally, "I guess I'm in." The ambassador nodded. "Then stand here and place your hands on the crystal." Daniel stepped closer. The crystal was cool to the touch, its glow steady but alive, like it was breathing. Neva rested her hands on the other side of it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel felt it, a faint pull, like a thread being tied between them. His vision blurred. He wasn't just seeing the room anymore. He was feeling something else, something warmer. A strange quiet filled his mind, followed by the gentle echo of another presence. "Daniel?" The voice wasn't spoken aloud, but it was unmistakably hers. Soft, clear, inside his mind. Yeah. It's me, he thought, unsure if she would hear. I hear you, she replied. And you hear me. The bond tightened. Then something incredible happened. Through his eyes, Neva saw. He felt her sudden rush of emotion, shock, awe, almost disbelief. She gasped aloud, even as her mind sent a flood of questions and wonder. Is this light? Is this color? Yeah, Daniel thought. That's what you're seeing. Those curtains over there are silver. The crystal is glowing blue. And your hair, well, it's shining under the light. He felt her trying to hold on to every detail. She studied the walls, the patterns, the gentle movement of the light above. It was like watching someone see the universe for the first time. Tears gathered at the corners of her pale eyes. I have dreamed of this, she whispered in his mind. But I never thought... Daniel's chest tightened. Well, now you can, anytime you want. And it wasn't just her who gained something. Through the bond, Daniel felt her world, too. The soft vibrations through the floor, the faint shifts in air currents when someone moved nearby, the subtle change in the room's energy when a person's emotions shifted. It was like gaining a whole new layer of senses. You can feel all that? He asked. Always, she said. Every step, every sound, every breath has a shape. They stayed like that for a long time, exploring each other's perceptions. Daniel walked slowly around the room, letting her see through his eyes, while she guided him to stand in certain spots so he could feel the air shifts she sensed. It was strange and beautiful at the same time. Finally, the ambassador spoke. The bond is complete. Daniel stepped back, feeling the crystal's glow fade under his hands. Neva's hover chair hummed softly as she turned toward him. Her eyes were still wet, but her voice was steady. Thank you, she said. Daniel gave a small, awkward smile. Guess we're stuck with each other now. Her lips curved upward. There are worse fates. As they left the chamber, Daniel noticed something had changed, not in the station, but in himself. He could still feel her presence in his mind, like a quiet second heartbeat. She wasn't reading his thoughts constantly, but there was a steady awareness between them. They walked together, her in the hover chair, him matching her pace. When they reached the corridor that led back to his section of the station, she stopped. Will you come tomorrow? Her voice in his mind was softer now. Yeah, he thought. I'll be there. And when he finally returned to his quarters, he realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next repair job or the next meal. He was thinking about a princess who had just seen the world through his eyes and had shown him an entirely new one in return. He could still do his engineering work, and Neva spent her time in diplomatic meetings. They met in the evenings to practice sharing their senses, her learning to control her new vision through his eyes, him learning to read the subtle vibrations and air changes she sensed. But slowly the reality of the bond began to show. It started with small things. One morning, Daniel woke up feeling a dull ache in his legs. At first, he thought it was from climbing maintenance ladders the day before. Then Neva's voice brushed against his mind. I am sorry. I had some muscle strain today. It must have reached you. He laughed it off, but by the afternoon he noticed something else. Whenever she grew tired, his own energy seemed to fade. It wasn't constant, but it was enough to make a long day of work feel even longer. The opposite happened, too. When Daniel was frustrated fixing a stubborn power relay, he felt her mind tense. "Your thoughts are sharp today," she noted. "They scratch at the edges of mine." "Guess that's my temper showing," he replied, trying to soften his mood. The bond wasn't just sharing senses, it was sharing parts of themselves they couldn't hide. On the fourth day, Neva invited Daniel to attend a Tavern council meeting aboard her ship. The long silver chamber was filled with Tavern nobles and advisors. Their tall, graceful figures stood around a circular table, their clothing shimmering in soft light. Daniel felt their eyes on him the moment he entered, and through the bond, he felt Neva sense their emotions. Hesitation, doubt, even disapproval. One noble, his voice cool, said, "Princess, it is unusual to bring your bond partner to such a gathering. Especially a human of no rank." Daniel felt her steady herself before she spoke. "The bond makes us equals in purpose. If I am here, he is here." The noble's eyes narrowed. "We do not question your right to choose, Princess, but some worry about the strength of a bond formed under such unusual circumstances." Daniel felt a flicker of annoyance rise in him. Neva caught it instantly through the bond. "Do not answer in anger," she warned quietly in his mind. Instead, she addressed the noble. "Strength is not measured by appearance or tradition. It is measured by what we can do together." Another council member spoke. "And what can this human do besides cause whispers among the delegates?" Daniel bit his tongue, but Neva's voice was calm as she said, "He lets me see, and I let him feel. That is already more than any of you offered me." The room went silent for a moment. Daniel wasn't sure if that silence meant respect or disapproval, but he knew one thing. Neva wasn't afraid of them. Later, as they left the chamber, Daniel asked, "You're not worried about making enemies?" "I already had them before I met you," she said. "But now I also have an ally." He couldn't help but grin. "I'll take that." The next challenge came during a diplomatic reception. The hall was bright with soft gold lights, filled with humans, Tavern, and members of other allied species. Music played in the background, and small dishes of strange foods floated on tiny hovering trays. Daniel was not used to such events. He stuck close to Neva, quietly describing the room to her while she greeted guests. But he couldn't help noticing the way some people looked at them. A few glanced at Neva's hover chair, then at him, and whispered behind their hands. Through the bond, Neva caught his irritation. "Do not let their small minds trouble you," she said. "Easier said than done," he replied. One human officer finally spoke aloud, his tone half joking, but edged with something sharper. "So, you're the guy who bonded with the princess. Must be nice having royal privileges now." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's not about privileges." "Oh? Then why you?" the officer asked. "Couldn't find anyone more suitable?" Before Daniel could answer, Neva spoke, her voice carrying across the nearby guests. "He was the only one who did not turn away. That makes him the most suitable of all." The officer looked embarrassed and muttered something before walking away. Daniel glanced at Neva. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," she said, simply. "I did." Later that night, as Daniel walked back to his quarters, the bond carried a quiet feeling from Neva. Pride mixed with gratitude. He realized she was just as aware of his small daily struggles as he was of hers. And in the days that followed, he learned that sharing senses could also mean saving each other from mistakes. Once, while working near a high-voltage power core, Daniel didn't notice a faint vibration on the floor, a sign of unstable machinery. Neva's warning hit his mind instantly. Stop. Something is wrong under your feet. He stepped back, just as a panel sparked dangerously. Another time, during a meeting, Neva caught herself losing focus when the conversation shifted to technical matters. Daniel quietly sent her a mental image of the diagrams in front of him, helping her keep pace. Still, not everything was smooth. The bond made them closer, but it also meant there was no hiding bad days. When Daniel was exhausted after a double shift, Neva felt his weariness pulling at her own focus. When Neva had a painful muscle spasm, Daniel's work slowed, his concentration scattered. One evening, Daniel sighed. We're starting to trip over each other. It is part of the bond, Neva said. We will learn balance. He nodded, though he wasn't sure how long that would take. But deep down, he knew they were already adapting, slowly finding a rhythm. By the end of the week, word about their partnership had spread across the station. Some still doubted them, but others had started to notice small changes. Neva speaking more confidently in meetings, Daniel seeming more focused in his work. Neither said it out loud, but both knew. The real test of the bond was still ahead for E. Now they were simply learning how to move through the galaxy together. The Tavern ship was scheduled to leave the Human Alliance station in 5 days. Preparations were underway, supplies loaded, navigation charts updated, and systems checked. Daniel assumed the trip would go smoothly. After all, Tavern ships were famous for their precision. But that changed one evening. Daniel was in the engineering deck of the station, finishing a repair on a cargo lift, when a sudden pulse of unease rippled through his mind. It wasn't his own feeling. It was Neva's. Daniel, her voice came through the bond. Something is wrong on the ship. He paused. What do you mean? The floor vibrations have changed in the engine section. Very faint, but unnatural. Daniel's brow furrowed. Neva had always been able to sense tiny changes like that. If she said it was wrong, it probably was. I'll come right over, he thought. When he arrived at the Tavern ship, the crew was busy moving crates and checking systems. Neva waited in the docking bay, her hover chair still, her pale eyes focused. In his direction, I told the crew, but they didn't detect anything unusual, she said quietly. It is subtle. Like someone walking on a bridge without permission. Light enough to be missed. Daniel nodded. Then let's check together. She led him to the engine corridor. The hum of the star drive was steady, but Daniel could feel her attention sharpen through the bond. She stopped suddenly. There, she whispered. 2 steps forward, the panel on the left. Daniel crouched and opened the panel. Inside, the wiring looked intact, at first glance. But when he looked closer, he saw it. A tiny, smooth device attached to the main conduit, its casing marked with no known manufacturer's symbol. That's not supposed to be here, Daniel muttered. He scanned it with his handheld tool. The readings made his stomach tighten. It wasn't a bomb, but it was a timed disruption unit. Once activated, it would send false data to the navigation system, making it think the ship was in a safe path when it wasn't. The result could be a collision or a drift into a hazardous region of space. Someone's trying to cause an accident, Daniel said. Neva's voice was firm. We must find out who. They decided not to raise an alarm immediately. Whoever planted the device might still be aboard, and if they knew they'd been discovered, they could trigger it early. Daniel removed the device carefully and stored it in a secure pouch. Then he and Neva began their quiet search. Through the bond, they worked like one. Neva moved slowly along the corridors, sensing faint patterns in footsteps and floor vibrations. Daniel checked maintenance logs and access panels, looking for signs of tampering. In one narrow corridor near the rear, cargo bay, Neva stopped. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. Daniel concentrated. At first he felt nothing unusual, just the faint hum of the ship's systems. But then, faintly, there was a light, rhythmic vibration, moving away from them. "Someone's walking," he murmured. Neva nodded, and trying to keep quiet. They followed the sound, keeping their distance. The footsteps led to a storage room. The door was slightly open. Daniel peered inside. A tall figure, dressed in a dark maintenance uniform, was kneeling over another open panel. His hands moved quickly, attaching a second disruption device. Daniel stepped inside. "Hey! That's restricted!" The figure spun around, eyes wide. Then he bolted for the side door. "Stop him!" Neva called, and her voice carried both in the air and in Daniel's mind. Daniel sprinted after the man, the bond giving him small cues from Neva. Left turn ahead. Narrow path. He's slowing near the junction. Her senses guided him through the winding corridors. Finally, Daniel tackled the man near the auxiliary systems room. They crashed to the floor. Crew members arrived within seconds, drawn by the noise. The man struggled, but Daniel held him down until the guards restrained him. When they searched his uniform, they found identification from a neutral trading guild, but deeper scans revealed a hidden chip carrying encrypted orders from a rival, Empire. The orders were clear. Sabotage the Tavern ship to destroy trust between the Tavern and the Human Alliance. In the council chamber, the Tavern ambassador listened as Daniel and Neva explained what had happened. The captured agent stood under guard, silent but tense. "This would have caused a disaster," the ambassador said gravely. "The loss of the ship would have been blamed on human negligence. Our alliance might have broken apart." Neva turned, her head toward Daniel. "We only found him because we worked together." Daniel smiled faintly. "Guess the bond's earning its keep." Several of the nobles who had doubted them exchanged glances. The quiet respect in their eyes was new. Later, when the formal statements were over and the threat neutralized, Daniel and Neva walked through the docking bay toward the station. "You saved my life," she said suddenly. "We saved each other," Daniel replied. "You felt the problem. I just had the tools to fix it." Through the bond, Daniel felt a wave of gratitude from her, not just for catching the saboteur, but for believing her instinct when others had dismissed it. "You trust me more than most of my own people," her mind voice said softly. "Maybe that's because I know what it's like when no one listens," he replied. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. The bond felt stronger now, not just because of what they shared, but because they had faced real danger together. On the other side of the station, Neva sat in her quarters, quietly memorizing the colors she had seen through his eyes. The soft silver of the ship's walls, the deep blue of the glowing device, the sharp white of the station's lights during the chase. Both of them knew the threat was over for now, but they also knew this wasn't the end. If someone had tried once to break the alliance, they could try again, and when that happened, Daniel and Neva would be ready. The first light of dawn touched the silver towers of Leora's capital. The city, which had once been silent and full of whispered pity for the blind and disabled princess, was now alive with an unusual tension. From the palace balcony, Leora stood with her cane in hand, listening to the distant rumble of machinery and the soft marching of soldiers. The alien kingdom was at its most fragile moment. An invading force was approaching, and the only real hope lay with a plan made by a human who had once been a stranger to their world. Daniel stood beside her, checking the datapad in his hands. His voice was calm, but inside he carried a storm of worry. "They will arrive in 6 hours. We must be ready before they cross the outer shield line." Leora turned her head toward the sound of his voice. "And are our people ready?" "They are," Daniel replied. "But the council still doubts the plan. They think you cannot lead this battle because of your condition." A small smile touched Leora's lips. "They said the same about our bond. They were wrong then. They are wrong now." Her words carried a strength Daniel admired. This was no longer the shy princess everyone pitied. This was a leader. In the war room, maps and holograms glowed over the table. Generals discussed defense lines, troop formations, and shield timings. The invading army, machines and soldiers from the hostile Zoran Empire, was twice their size. The council members spoke in hushed tones, avoiding Leora's direction, but Daniel caught their glances. Finally, Leora placed her hand on the table. "Enough," she said. "Daniel and I have studied this enemy. We know their weak point. The only way to win is not to meet them head-on, but to lure them." The room went silent. Even the faint hum of the holograms felt distant. "They expect us to defend the city walls," Leora continued. "But we will open the gates." Gasps filled the chamber. "They will think we are surrendering," Daniel added. "But it's a trap. Our ships will be hidden in the mountain tunnels. When they enter, we will collapse the passage behind them and cut their army in two. Then our strike teams will target their command units." The plan was bold, dangerous, and to the council, reckless. But Leora's voice left no room for doubt. "I will be on the front line guiding our people. If I can face them, so can you." The next hours were a blur of movement. Troops armed themselves. Engineers adjusted shield timings. In the dark tunnels under the mountains, Daniel oversaw the placement of explosives, while Leora moved among the soldiers, speaking words of courage. A young soldier named Wren hesitated as she approached. "Princess, why risk yourself? If something happens to you—" "If something happens to me, then I have done my duty," Leora replied softly. "But if I stay behind, then I have failed before the battle even begins." Her words spread quickly. Soon soldiers whispered them to one another, finding courage where fear had been. When the Zoran army finally appeared over the horizon, their massive walkers cast long shadows across the land. The sound of their approach was like distant thunder. From the walls, the defenders watched as the gates of the city slowly opened. The enemy commander, seeing no resistance, ordered his forces forward. Daniel stood with a small team on the mountain ridge, hidden behind rock and metal. His earpiece crackled with Leora's calm voice. "They are inside. Wait for my signal." The first wave of Zoran soldiers marched through the open streets. Then came the heavy machines. Daniel's eyes never left the enemy command unit in the center. "Now," Leora's voice said. The mountain shook as explosions tore through the passages. Dust and smoke rose in thick clouds. The enemy army was split in two, their supply lines cut off. From hidden positions, the human-engineered strike ships shot out like arrows, blasting the command units before they could react. But the Zoran were not slow to respond. The front half of their army turned on the defenders, firing heavy plasma rounds that shook the streets. Daniel's team rushed down from the mountains to join the ground fight. Through the chaos, Leora moved with her guards, using her other senses to guide her. She could hear the enemy footsteps, the hiss of weapons, and the cries of her soldiers. Using her cane and a small handheld locator device, she marked targets for the artillery units. At one point, an enemy soldier broke through the line and charged toward her. Before Daniel could reach her, Leora sidestepped, striking his weapon arm with surprising precision. A guard finished the fight for her, but the soldiers around her saw, and their morale surged. The battle raged for hours. The Zoran began to retreat when their command units fell, but victory was not yet certain. Daniel saw the danger. One of the enemy's massive walkers was powering up its main cannon, aiming for the palace. "Leora, get to cover!" he shouted into his comm. Instead, her voice came steady and firm. "Not yet. Guide me." Daniel ran through the chaos toward her, reaching her side as she positioned the locator device toward the walker. He placed his hand over hers, adjusting the aim. "Now!" A distant artillery unit fired, striking the walker's core. It exploded in a bright flash, sending shockwaves through the street. The defenders roared in victory. By sunset, the enemy was gone. The people of Leora's kingdom poured into the streets, cheering. Soldiers saluted their princess, not out of duty but out of respect. Daniel stood beside her, dust-covered and tired. "You led them," he said quietly. "We led them," Leora replied. The council members approached, their proud expressions replacing the doubt they once carried. One of them bowed deeply. "Princess, we were wrong." Leora only smiled. "The battle is won, but our work is not over." And as the twin moons rose over the city, everyone knew this was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. Chambers, her hands resting lightly on her cane. The room was soft with the glow of evening light filtering through the curtains. Daniel stood nearby, his eyes watching her carefully. They had both changed. The war had shown their strength, not just as leaders or fighters, but as partners connected by something few could understand. Leora spoke first. "The Council has agreed to new talks with the Human Alliance. They see now that trust is not a weakness." Daniel nodded. "It was your courage that made them listen. And our bond. It showed them what is possible." She smiled faintly. "Our bond is more than tradition. It is a bridge between two worlds." The next day, the Great Hall was filled with representatives from many species. Humans, Tavran, and allied worlds gathered to celebrate peace and a new alliance. Banners fluttered, and music echoed through the space. Leora and Daniel stood side by side on the stage. When Leora spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "We have faced doubt and danger," she said, "but we have also found strength in each other. Let this bond remind us that differences are not barriers, but the foundation of unity." The crowd erupted in applause. For once, the blind and disabled princess was not seen as weak. She was a symbol of hope. After the ceremony, Daniel and Leora walked in the garden outside the hall. Flowers bloomed around them, their colors bright and alive. Daniel turned to her. Do you think people will truly accept this? The bond between us? Leora looked at the stars beginning to shine above. They must. For the future to be better, they have no choice. He smiled. I never imagined my life would change so much. Neither did I, she said. But sometimes change is the greatest gift. In the quiet moments that followed, Daniel reached out and took her hand. Through their bond, the warmth flowed between them, not just of touch, but of shared hope and understanding. Thank you, Leora whispered, for seeing me. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, for trusting me. Together, they looked toward the horizon. The dawn was coming, the dawn of a new era. Back in her private chambers, Leora sat alone for a moment. She closed her eyes, feeling the connection to Daniel deep within her mind. The bond was not just a link of senses, it was a promise of partnership, strength, and endless possibility. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not just by the world, but by someone who understood her in every way. Far away, the stars continued to shine, silent witnesses to the story of a blind and disabled princess and a simple human who had dared to believe in her. Their story was a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who refuse to be limited by the world's expectations, and that together they could change everything.